Okay, so now we've made it to the next section where we're going to talk about event listeners. So if you're new to this channel and you would like to follow along with the curriculum, the link is in the description. Let's get into it. Event listeners. Using inline event handling is a good way to get started handling events. A second way to handle events uses the DOM objects and methods. Remember, the DOM is an object representation of the entire web page. Pay attention to what I just said. The DOM is an object representation of the entire web page, of the whole page now. The DOM allows us to use JavaScript to configure our event handlers. The event handling declaration will no longer be in the HTML element attribute, but will instead be inside the script tags or in an external JavaScript file. Add event handlers in JavaScript. I want you to really pay attention to this because you need to understand how this works. Before we add event handlers in JavaScript, we need to learn a new vocabulary term related to events in programming. A listener is another name for an event handler. The term listener refers to the code listening for the event to occur. Remember, event handlers, they're listeners, they're waiting on something. If the code hears the event, then the event is handled. Add event listener is used to add an event handler, aka listener. Add event listeners is a method available on instances of window, document, and element classes. So an element, add event listener, then we're going to pass it a string, and then we're going to pass it a function. That's the syntax right here. An element is a reference to a DOM element object. Event name is the name of an event that the variable and element supports. A function is a reference to a function to start. We are going to use a named function. We want to set the name function urang as the click handler for the button element. Notice that the value passed in as the element name is click instead of on click. All right, so let's look at this here. So we have the title, add event listeners. We have the page element, which we pass in the text. We have an ID, and then we also have a class. So it has both an ID and a class. And so the button ID, which is ring button, ring bell is what's going to be inside the button, a label for the button. But here we go, we have this script tag, and inside the script tag, and notice that the script tag is coming after the button. So here we got a function urang, and then we got document. We're going to the document class. Get element by ID is the object. It's getting access to this ID right here because it's called main text. Then we're going to the .inner HTML, which is a property, and then we add the compound operator urang, and then we console log urang. Now we have a note here, a comment, obtain a reference to the button element. So now we have let button. We create a variable. We're familiar with this reference thing because we started creating classes a couple of chapters ago. And so now we're storing in document get element by ID ring button. Here we go. Here's the ID ring button. And so we're passing that in. And so this let is the variable, which is an object. Set name function urang as the click event handler. So now all we need is the button, which has access to right here. We'll say urang this button right here, And then we do button, add event listener, click you rang. So when we click it, it's going to say you rang. So we understand this now because this is an object. This object button is holding the document get element by ID, which is ring button. We're getting access. This method gives us access to this get element by ID, which is this right here. And now we have access to the ring bell button. So now when we click it, it's going to call that function you rang, which is this right here. And it's going to print you rang with this up here, a bunch of really valuable text, ... you rang once it's clicked. Right now, it's just going to have the text. Once you click the button, then it's going to say you rang. Play around with it so you can see the results. Be sure to use the correct event name when declaring the event name. An error will not be thrown if an invalid event name is given. Note: this chapter uses DOM methods to add event handlers. When searching online, you may find examples using jQuery to add event handlers, which look like this right here. We do on click, and we pass in a string called click, and then whatever it is going to come behind that. Or .click, like so. jQuery is a JavaScript library designed to simplify working with the DOM. jQuery popularity has declined as the DOM itself has gained features and improved usability. Now, if you run across jQuery, not to say it's not being used today, it's just normally you're going to find it in legacy code or with no other options. That's the only way you're going to use a jQuery. But I think it's kind of making a comeback a little bit. Now, the second parameter, the event listener, is a function. Remember, there are many ways to declare a function in JavaScript. So far, we have passed in name function as the event handler. Add event listener will accept any valid function as the event handler. It's possible and quite common to pass an anonymous function as the event handler, which we will do that more when we get into React. So this is the syntax again. And then this is the actual, like I said, this block of code is going to be the code. Now, event details. A benefit of using add event listener is that an event parameter can be passed to the event handler function. This event is an object instance of the event class, which defines methods and properties related to events. So we're going to put event listeners for events. Like, for instance, we'll talk about it later. But a mouse, moving your mouse, this is an event right here. And we can track this. An event add listener, event name, give it a name, and then we pass in the function with the event object, or the function with the parameter. And so here we're going to console log event type, event.type, event target, event.target. And so here the event.type is a string name of the event. Event.target is an element object that was the target of the event. We'll explain. Above, we saw how we could use add event listener to add the function you rang as the event handler for the ring bell button. Use add event listener. Could you add the function greet friends as the event handler for the greet friends button? Okay, I want you to try this. Play around with this code so you can get a better understanding. Now, event bubbling. Remember that the DOM is a tree of elements with an HTML tag, element at the root. The tree structure of an HTML page is made of elements inside of elements. That layering effect can cause some events like click to be triggered on a series of elements. Bubbling refers to an event being propagated to an ancestor element. Pay attention to this, bubbling. You need to understand this term. Like I said, it's in bold. It's something you need to remember. When an event is triggered, an element that has parent elements. Events are triggered first on the element that is most closely affected by the event. So let's pay attention. Let's look at the example. We can add an event handler to the button, a div and HTML tag element via the document global variable. So let's take a look at the example of the code. You're familiar with this. You're familiar with the head. We're bringing in the title. We're passing in the styles element inside the file, inside the head, so it has access to the styles, which we know that this is going to be an ID because of the hashtag. So hashtag toolbar, that means this is an ID, and it's going to it's connecting this particular CSS to this ID. Inside of our body, we have the div, and we call it ID toolbar. So it's going to get these styles right here, this whole entire div. Now we have the button ID ring button, ring bell. Then we have the script tag with the JavaScript inside of it. As you break this down and go through it, you'll see we got the variable button, and we're storing in the document element. Get element by ID, which is ring button, which is this button right here. Now it's the button. It's all of this is this button right here, and we're adding the event listener with the script, with the function that we're creating. Add listener, click function event console log button clicked. So what all it's going to do is just console log button is clicked when you click on it. Letting you know you'll do something like this to make sure it's working, but you're going to give it more logic than just click button. So document get element by ID toolbar, add event listener, click function event, and then console.log toolbar clicked. So we'll have a toolbar. So like for instance, if I can, let me go all the way up here. So at the top of this, you'll see that over here, let's call this the toolbar right here. If I click inside of this, if I add an event listener, when I click on that, it'll let me know that it's been clicked. All right, so console.log output. If button is clicked, button clicked, toolbar clicked, document clicked. So this is what we're passing in, document click. So if we're putting an event listener on the document as well. So whatever you put an event listener on, if you want to track some information, this is great for tracking data by putting event listeners on, because you may want to track where a user is clicking on your website. So you could put an event listener for this whole document right here. Wherever I click, that it's going to register that click wherever I click, and you can set it up to where wherever I click, it'll give you a coordinates where the click was. This is very helpful when you're creating UIs. Now, in some cases, you may want to stop events from bubbling up. We can use event stop propagation to stop events from being sent to ancestor elements. Handlers for parent elements will not be triggered if a child element calls event.stop propagate. So here's the syntax right here. And then you're going to add it at the end after it goes through, just like when we were talking about doing a return. Once we get down here to this part, event stop propagation, it's going to stop the event listener. So think of it like when we have a return. Once you hit that return, the function is done. So here we go. We're going to try it. Use the HTML above. What happens when you click in the green? After you see the result, try adding stop propagation to the button click handler and seeing what happens when you click the button. All right, go ahead and try that. You're at that point, you can start testing this stuff out and getting an understanding. So check your understanding. That's the end of this section. And remember, the more you do, the more you improve. See you in the next section.